Today, we're going to talk about Ready Membership, which is our all-in-one association management system platform. Specifically, talk about our experiences in the US and the UK market, and as a group, we're going to sort of compare and contrast.
Hello, my name is Gretchen Steenstra. I work for Delcor, and we're a consulting company that helps with all technology management from shopping for a new system, such as an AMS, all the way to managing your infrastructure. I'm also the chair of the ASE Technology Council, and I'm a founder of AWTC, which is Association Women Technology Champions. And so my whole focus in life is making sure that business users and technologists are working together and not so adversarial.
I'm Laura Armstrong. I'm with Symmetry. I'm a senior consultant. I've been doing this for a while. And prior to being a consultant, I was an IT director for several American associations. So I've been on both sides of the river. Symmetry is a consulting firm as well. And we also do some infrastructure management and all of the above. And really looking forward to hearing more about what the UK needs.
Hi there, Scott Cole. I'm Chief Revenue Officer at Pixelate. I've been working in the membership sector now for just over a decade, predominantly in the UK, but over the last sort of 12, 18 months, been really exploring the US market and what that's got to offer.
Pixelate as a business has been delivering membership association projects now for a couple of decades, and in the last 3 to 5 years, we've been working with Ready Membership as an all-in-one platform, predominantly in the UK and European markets, but also more recently in North America. And certainly from our perspectives, we have noticed some obvious differences in terms of things like how taxes are handled and all that fun stuff, different sort of regulations and different language as well, where we share a language but also have some differences in terms of what we mean when we say certain things. So we've obviously been adding a number of things to our product to take into account some of those cultural, regulatory, and sort of language differences. But we've also noticed, I suppose, sort of almost a meeting in the middle, metaphorically, of in the US market, all-in-one systems, AMS systems, being quite a dominant type of platform with a lot of very popular vendors, and conversely in the UK. AMS systems never really being a thing in the same degree, about all people selecting a number of sort of best of breed platforms and trying to wire them together, and all the benefits and drawbacks of that in terms of integrations and sort of, constantly upgrading and evolving things. Be interested to hear from both of you in terms of what you feel the key challenges are in the US market for associations, and also any differences that you might be aware of how things are approached.
Some of the big trends that have been sustained over the last few years is marketing technology is really becoming the biggest driver, and they have the most money. And so we've had a shift in the US from the membership, the AMS being the main hub of technology to run an association. And now marketing technology is much more visible and present. And so that has kind of demoted the classic AMS. The other swing that we had is we went from all-in-ones to a more diverse ecosystem like you're describing, Alex. But now we've had a lot of data sprawl and app sprawl. So people are consolidating back into a core AMS and starting to trim down how many apps they have, because that's really, we're seeing a lot of data hoarding and app hoarding where people buy, but they don't ever go back and remove things. So those are some of the trends that we're watching. The second one is around people. At the Tech Council this year, we did a lot of work about cross collaboration between the business, IT, marketing, communications, and finance, and trying to get those groups to work together at the beginning of a project and really make sure that it's a well-rounded plan, rather than bringing in IT at the end of a project or finance at the end of a project when it's time to get to work. Moving those discussions up earlier into the planning cycle, that was a big focus that we had this year, to reduce surprises, make sure that you had the right talent in the room at the right time.
Well, I agree with what Gretchen said. I think that we have seen a lot of the AMS being still the core, but kind of the core place where users and members are able to access their information. So everything is sort of feeding in, not, well, I take that back, not everything, but pertinent information is feeding back into the AMS, and that becomes the outward facing for both staff and members, clients, participants, whatever you want to call them, to gain information that they need. So not everything, but just what they need, in terms of member portals, in terms of staff being able to quickly go and find things. Um, but there are so many other systems that are feeding into that. And they all have their purposes. It's the best of breed. They all have their purposes. They all do something a little bit better than maybe the AMS, the core AMS does. I have one example of I have a client who's selecting a registration slash housing slash I don't know what else system. The core AMS could do a lot of that function, but they don't want to have to do it themselves. They don't want to have to manage that themselves in the AMS. So they have gone out and they have selected one, which will then feed information into the core AMS that they can access quickly and do what they need to do with it. So that's sort of an example.
Definitely. And I think one of the things that we're seeing as well is this, rather than this all in one versus, everything being separate is almost like a hub and spoke type approach.
Mhm.
And maybe the hub is slightly fatter with some organizations than others in terms of what it is that they're looking to do. But I think the overarching theme as well will be how much the organization really cares. I mean, obviously, lots of organizations profess to care about creative and UI and UX, but if they truly do care about the user experience for the members, and obviously making that as seamless as it can be, sometimes that also drives the decisions around, whether they will use an AMS to do the front end experience or whether they want something a bit more, modern, a bit more 2020s onwards, I suppose. I was going to ask both of you what you thought in terms of what's changed sort of post-COVID for associations in the US, what sort of changed post-COVID and stuck, and what might have changed and reverted back or starting to revert back. Do you have any thoughts there at all, either of you?
I think I don't know if it's related to COVID or necessarily or just timing of technology, but like you were saying, Alex, the user experience, we're becoming less and less tolerant of a poor user experience. And so I'm seeing a big push of dedicated e-commerce solutions as one of the apps that people are investing a lot of time, like Laura was saying, really shrinking down the core of the AMS to what it does well and trying to stop fighting to make a system do something it's just not good at. The other really difficult though balance is how many resources your organization has. Small to medium sized staff really struggle with wanting to have a more diverse ecosystem and wanting to use some of the other tools. They just don't have the capacity to keep track of them all and maintain all the integration and data that comes with it. So I think that's the other thing that's difficult. We talk about the opportunities of technology, but if you're not staffed in a way that you can manage it or have partners who can help you manage it, you can't use it. And so that can be very frustrating for people. And when we were at AMS, Alex and Scott, a lot of people there are small to mid-sized staff, and they just have to be a little bit more creative and selective about what they do.
And I think for us, in terms of building out Ready membership, I mean, I think that really is the kind of the whole ethos behind why we came up with that platform. If you have an all-in-one platform that works the way it works, and it's traditional and it's multi-tenanted, and the computer says no, right, when it comes to we want this feature or we want that feature, and can we change this or can we change that, then obviously you're then into a discussion of, well, if it doesn't do it and I can't make it do it, then I'm going to have to plug something in. If they've got a call center who love HubSpot, then fine, integrate HubSpot into the mix, right? There's no reason to try and replicate call center functions within an AMS system. Do you see any change in the events setup at all as well?
I think it depends, to everyone's point. I think it depends on the size of the organization. There's a lot of small to mid organizations that are going to handle their own registration. And what they think is a large meeting to another organization is, a a webinar that they've had or something like that. And I think that really does play into what gets integrated, because there are, systems out there that will do everything and provide you a person to do it, So it does depend, and it all budget is also, we haven't said the B word yet, but budget is always a consideration in any of this. Depending on, how big your organization is, how much money you have to spend on what you want, and that is a critical piece for any any software, any platform being flexible and being able to provide, a platform type experience for less money than a big platform. So I think that's really important, for people to know that there are options, and that you should explore with a look at what the member and the user are going to want to see. Because to the remote part, yeah, we're all remote. Your members have always been remote. No, so we need to make sure that so we need to make sure that they're getting what they want.
And I guess in terms of some of the differences that we might see, I guess the sheer scale and size of the US does, play into that, reinforce that kind of remote element of the fact that if historically you had chapters and you had regional, representation, some you had a lot of lobbying, you had representation in DC, you were medical, you had some more people in Chicago, or, so I suppose there's always that scale element that we're potentially dealing with. Is there any other areas that you can think of that that the US market is decidedly different to sort of the European and more international markets?
I think for one thing, you all have more regulatory associations, where the U.S. doesn't have quite as much of that. We're more around what we provide for members, and any regulations or things like that are not, we're not under the provincial government checking in on seeing what's going on in our association, unless we do something horribly wrong, I mean, so I think that's a big difference. And I think I've had experience with that in the Canadian market, where you have different requirements than a US association typically does, around auditing, around case management, around complaints, things like that, and also the governmental auditing.
And the GDPR element is obviously a big if you have EU data subjects, is obviously a big point. And I know there's some regulations in California, and I guess at some point in time there may or may not be more regulations around data and data privacy coming along. What about the sort of the role of lobbying for associations? Because I mean, there's that's something I suppose that we don't see as active in terms of our market, in terms of, here's a list of congressional districts, or here's a list of data, and here's how you click a button to lobby your local representative. Notice I'm using words like representative rather than saying senator or congressperson, because I really have no clue. But yeah, is there much of that?
But that is typically a separate department because of the regulations in the US. How you lobby and advocate is typically has a whole independent set of rules and software that they use. So that is typically a little bit more segregated. But in the US, because we have, it's kind of our EU, each state has their own privacy regulations, and there are over 25 states that have active data privacy. Enforcing that is going to be difficult. But the other thing I've seen is individuals, and I think that's just universal, are feeling overwhelmed by how much marketing is happening to them. And I'm seeing individuals being less willing to share their data regardless of the regulation. So we're seeing a lot of organizations in the EU and in the US collect less data because members want to know how it's going to be used. And I think that's a really interesting behavior change, as we've been in this collection mode, Alex, for 20 years because we can. And to your point about just because we can, should we? I think associations are taking a hard look at, if I collect that data, I have to prove to you that I'm using it to help the member rather than just collect it to collect it. And the other thing that we've seen universally is a little bit more discipline of just because we can, should we? And having a little bit more of a discussion with our vendor partners to say, if we have all these niche rules, do we really need to program for all of them, or can we start collapsing them? Especially in the event space, we tend to explode pricing and create such a very difficult experience for people to figure out how to save a little bit of money, where I'm seeing some of those get really streamlined and down to the absolute essentials. And I think that's a good trend.
One of the trends we're seeing, and it may be the size and scale of projects that we're doing. So obviously with our Pixelate business, we're doing much larger projects. More with Ready Membership, it's more mid-size. But one of the things that we are seeing
Right.
with more Ready Membership projects is much more involvement and interest from C-level people. Now, clearly, if the budget, and again the B word, if
Yep.
the budget is a bit, a big number or a bigger number relative to the overall size and scale of the organization, then it's not unusual for sort of C-suite people to be involved or interested. But what's your view in terms of how people are going out and procuring these projects? Because obviously, if we look back a decade, you may have IT running the website. Hopefully not, because I think it should be a broad-based stakeholder group. But have you seen any kind of attitude shifts, or what's the sort of approach to procurement that you can see over there that may or may not be different to how we do things?
I think it's really important, like technology alignment to the strategic plan. And again, we are seeing this with our UK and EU clients as well as in the US. If you really are trying to align your mission, your goals, technology is one of those backbones that has to be included. So we're seeing more executives see technology not as a department that you call as a break fix or a singular thing. They're seeing it as just part of their human resource strategy, their financial strategy. Technology needs to be embedded just like that resource. And so we invite executives to say, how are you aligning your technology to support and drive your strategic plan? You don't need a separate technology plan. That needs to be embedded. And the other thing that we're seeing is executives really encouraging the business staff to be the champion. Like you said, Alex, IT absolutely has a role, but the business owners are becoming more visible and more educated. And so I think the overall configuration quality is going up because the business owners are the first voice, and then IT is working with them rather than the other way around.
I haven't done a single selection in the past 8 years in which the CEO or CIO or someone at the C-suite has not been, involved. I think there's probably a difference between the governance in the UK of an association. You know, here everybody reports back to a board of directors who have interests and who have say in how things are done. So the C-suite, the CEO has to be involved in these things. And to the business alignment, Gretchen, you got that. That is absolutely correct. And I think that's probably one big difference between the two sides of the not Pacific. Wait, it's at the Atlantic, isn't it? I know where I am. I swear I do.
And Scott, what do you think about, obviously, Eric, what's your experience in terms of procurement in the UK? Does that echo that point or not really?
Yeah, I mean, it does tend to vary, and as you say, kind of varies depending on the scale of the projects that we're dealing with. We still get quite differing RFPs coming through, where some are really, really prescriptive, where they're saying, it has to work like this, and it has to be built on this technology, or it has to be open source, or it has to be this or that. Through to the other end of it, which is we have these problems that we need to solve. You tell us as the experts how we should be solving them, and everything in between. Obviously, the latter ones are the ones we prefer because that gives us more flexibility to draw on our expertise across the business to respond to. But I can absolutely see why some organisations might prefer the former because it's much easier to then to kind of cross-check across the different suppliers. You kind of have the scoring matrix, and it's easier to kind of score at that point. But I think ultimately, if you go down that scoring route, you have to get to a point of the process where you are really kind of asking the expertise of the business and putting that into their hands. But yeah, in terms of the involvement of people, it does vary. We've done some projects where we've been working with IT managers and marketing managers and never really had much involvement with the CEO until the very last step of the process.
The other thing I think is in terms of people talking about digital transformation when they really mean digital projects, because I think, when people say, when is it going to be done? You can really then take the hint that this isn't kind of a seam of digital transformation throughout the business, but is actually more, we've got an ugly looking website, we've got a CRM that doesn't really work. We've nagged the board. They've given us some budget. We're going to go and spend it, and then we're going to go on and do things that we'd much rather be doing, right? And it's not being seen as a kind of a continuous improvement exercise. So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely encouraging, I think, to think that we're going to see better, a better procurement process, in general. But at the moment, as you say, we get really elaborate documents with not a lot of substance, I think it would be fair to say in some cases.
But what we are seeing, though, Alex, at the executive level and the boards are more willing to invest long-term in technology, because in the US, there was a type of funding that you could use for a one-time investment that didn't show up in the day-to-day financial statement. And so people were trying to reduce their day-to-day cost and then save up for these big technology projects. And that's one strategy you can use, and some organizations have to do it that way. One of the trends we are seeing, probably influenced by COVID, where we really had to get people up to speed and level up in technology, is the idea that it isn't over. These are software as a service fees. And in addition to just your regular fees that you pay every month, if you invest regularly and have the discipline, even if it's just once a year, to do a quick audit of what you're using, do some updates, pull your partners in, to Scott's point about, here's what we're doing with our organization this year, here are some problems we're wrestling with. Bring your vendors together. Instead of just doing it one time to implement, do that every single year. And so as people's maturity increases with the product, that's where you're really going to get your benefit of your investment, is in years 2, 3, 4, and 5. If you take the time to get rid of things you're not using anymore, ask your vendor partners and the experts, this is how we solved the problem in the beginning, as we were both all learning about each other. You were learning about us, we were learning about you. Now, how can we make the product stronger and better and more, just more aligned? They forget to do that. And I'm seeing more investment in that ongoing training, seeing professional development to keep people up to date on technology, being partnered with HR as part of ongoing performance. Like you said, Alex, this isn't IT's job to make sure people are using their systems well. This is part of your professional development as an individual staff member. So again, this more holistic, blended thought about technology, I think, is a really positive change.